Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ticked Off, a series where we explore everything from chronic illness and healing to pet care, outdoor adventure, and wellness tips for living your best life. I'm Olivia Abrams, the founder of TickMit, and your host for this series. Whether we're chatting with veterinarians, wellness experts, or passionate outdoor enthusiasts, our goal is to give you actionable insights and real stories that inspire and empower you. So let's dive in and meet today's guest. Candice Mathis and Debbie Nichols, the dynamic duo, two alpha gals, are on a mission to educate and empower those living with alpha gal syndrome, a life-altering allergy to mammal products triggered by a tick bite. After experiencing firsthand the challenges of navigating this condition, they've dedicated themselves to providing resources, advocacy, and a supportive community to help others reclaim their health and their confidence. Through their platform, they share expert-backed insights, practical lifestyle tips, and personal stories to inspire and guide those affected. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Olivia. We appreciate you taking the opportunity to share more about alpha-gal syndrome. So we're excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, for those who don't know, alpha-gal syndrome has really taken over the United States over the last couple of years. And I think in some areas it's even more impactful than Lyme disease. So I know there are so many people who have questions or are unfamiliar with it. So for those who are unfamiliar, what exactly is alpha-gal syndrome and what are its common symptoms?
Yeah, so you did a nice job summarizing it in your intro. But what it is alpha-gal is a tick-induced allergy to galactose alpha 1,3 galactose, which is a sugar that's commonly found in all mammals except for primates or humans and some primates. And what that means is that people who are bitten by this tick develop an allergy really to anything mammal, including mammal meat, but also mammal byproducts that are found in our food, in our household products, and our medication. That's really found everywhere.
Mhm. And if someone has the syndrome, what are the common symptoms that they may experience?
So they range. So they
Mhm.
range from mild to severe. So anything from hives and swelling to a rash, to GI, GI distress or issues, different symptoms there, to a drop in blood pressure, lightheadedness, dizziness, tachycardia, rapid heart rate. All the way to full-blown anaphylaxis. So you could have one of those symptoms or you could have multiple symptoms. The main indicator I would say that makes alpha-gal different than other allergies is that it typically presents with a delayed reaction. So say you eat steak or pork for dinner, a lot of times people are waking up in the middle of the night with symptoms, either covered in hives, GI distress, any of the things I mentioned, but it really there is a range in severity for a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Yeah. And based on some of the experts in like allergies that I've spoken to, is it true that this is so different from your common allergies because of the delayed effect in symptoms and why it's become such a mystery to people? Because most people who have some sort of other allergy, they might feel sick kind of right away on ingesting something, but this very much differentiates from that. And so it's become kind of a mystery.
Yes, yes. So there are a couple of things that differentiates it from other food allergies. The delay in reaction being the main one, but also it's considered a very inconsistent reaction. So sometimes you can be exposed and not experience any reactions at all, and the next time you're exposed, it could be anaphylaxis. So that's another telltale
Mhm.
sign that sets it apart. It's sometimes called the anytime allergy, not every time allergy.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And someone asked me if I have alpha-gal syndrome or someone I know has alpha-gal syndrome, are they always only allergic to, red meat, such as like pork or beef, or are they allergic to all mammal products, or is it sometimes only red meat and sometimes all mammal products?
Yes. Yes. And again, it makes it very hard because
Yeah.
some people are only allergic to beef. Some
Hmm.
people are only allergic to pork. But then Debbie and I are both allergic to beef, pork, dairy, any mammalian byproduct that would be in not only our food, but in our medications, in our beauty products, in our home care, personal care. The list kind of goes on. It was kind of a trial and error to figure that out. We continued to react, so we continued to dig into possible triggers. And I feel like that's kind of the only way that you fully know there is no like differentiation between if someone's numbers are a certain way, then it means that they are only allergic to this thing. They just don't know, what makes some people less severe than others or only allergic to the one mammal versus all the mammals. So.
Yeah. Someone who has alpha-gal syndrome, how has this impacted your daily life, particularly in terms of not just your diet, but also how you live your life socially?
Sure. So that's a great question because the truth is that a full-blown alpha-gal diagnosis turns your life on its head, right?
Yeah.
So many of our social interactions revolve around food, and this impacts everybody in the food allergy community. For us, in the most severe cases, we are fume reactive. So we have to think about where we're going when we leave the house, right? We've been hit in the grocery store. We've been hit when we've walked into a store that's say right next to a barbecue joint or something like that. So we have to think about where we're going. And then in addition to just monitoring what's in our food, there are some really easy things to identify, right? We're not going to eat steak or a pork chop or bacon or ice cream. But there's a
No, not
lot.
ice cream.
I know. Well, thank goodness for cashew milk ice cream
Right.
and oat
Very
milk ice
true.
cream.
Yeah.
We're on a mission to find good substitutes. But it's really hard to shop when you have alpha-gal syndrome because there are so many of these obscurely named terms for mammal byproducts like rennet and glycerin. And glycerin's a great example because it can be sourced from plants or it can be sourced from animals. And labeling does not have to disclose where their glycerin comes from. So it just makes it really hard. And we have to do the same thing when it comes to like our health and beauty products and our shampoo and things like that. And then also our pharmaceuticals, because something like 75% of our pharmaceuticals actually contain animal ingredients. And so every time we get a prescription, every time we go to the pharmacy, it requires a deep dive on if the medication is going to be safe for us.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, how do you navigate not just food, but as you were saying, there are a million products in cosmetics and medications and household items. Like, what is an item that you were used to having in your everyday life that has surprised you and that you can't use anymore?
Jeez. Well, there are things that we've had to change, like, for example, toilet paper. That's one that can contain mammal that we had to find safe toilet paper.
Yeah.
Wine, some alcoholic beverages. Now we have to check, what they're being clarified or filtered with.
Yeah, sugar, like refined white sugar, is fined using cattle bone char. So I feel like it's like we've been able to find substitutions. Like then we just have to make sure we buy organic, like certified organic sugar. We found the toilet paper that is safe. So I don't know that there's anything that we've totally had to completely eliminate. I think the hardest part for me is just the fume piece of it. Like I had to decline going to a Galentine's dinner with friends last night because they chose a restaurant that I was nervous about going to because it's an open concept kitchen and they do a lot of burgers and steak and
And so you're worried about
that. Yeah. So I think for me, and maybe, this is a good one. So like Debbie and I have talked about this. It might not be food that we miss the most, but it's wearing like a wool coat or cashmere sweater. Like those are the things like we can't do that. So I think we miss probably that more than cheese.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah. Is there, do you, oh my God, cheese, I can't.
Yeah.
Is there a difference in the reaction you may get by ingesting something like a medication or, a food versus using a cosmetic or wearing a cashmere sweater? Like, do your symptoms differentiate?
Mine do. So I think a great example of this is the fume reaction. Like if and I discovered this because my family was going to get burgers at a local place and I was getting a sandwich from the place next door and I was like, I'll just meet you over there. This was a couple years ago. And I walked in and immediately my throat started to tighten. And so that reaction for me is anaphylaxis and it's very fast. Whereas if I have a dairy, which I've been exposed to accidentally in the past, it's like 3 hours on the mark and it starts with GI symptoms. And then I get the additional anaphylactic symptoms and I use my EpiPen, but very different. I mean, I don't know about you, but with the things that I put on my body, I'll get very itchy with that, where I don't necessarily get itchy. And
that's what I was thinking of. Like another classic sign of alpha-gal is itching on your palms and the soles of your feet. I get that. I've gotten that more from like if I wore a wool sweater or wool socks or walking on a wool rug, like my feet will itch. But I have also had anaphylaxis wearing a wool coat. So I think there's a lot of factors in play too, like where your threshold is. I'm sure just from a mast cell perspective, there can be a lot of underlying factors to how you're reacting.
And for people who have alpha-gal, like you guys mentioned, like going to a restaurant, dining out, traveling is really difficult. And not that it's exactly the same, but I have a lot of people in my life with celiac. And so I'm always cognizant of like, if I'm going to dinner with them, do they have a gluten-free menu? Can they make substitutions, etc.? But what are your top tips for someone with alpha-gal to navigate dining out, traveling, trying to have these normal social interactions in everyday life?
Yeah. So I feel like as we're talking, I think every question, the first thing that comes to my mind is we have to always be prepared.
That's exactly what I was
like we can't just do things on the fly, unfortunately. But it ultimately makes traveling more, manageable, safer, and then more fun, because you can find safe options. And we really love planning trips and we've gotten, really good at it, I feel like. So, we help other people, that we have a mentorship program. So that's something we actually do a lot with our clients and just showing them that it can be done. You just have to be prepared.
That initial diagnosis, which was accompanied by relief, to be honest, because I'd been sick for so long, and to know that there was something I could do to not feel so sick, was a relief. But then you start to think about the changes that are going to have to be made and the things you're going to have to give up and all these things. And there's a grieving process. And to be honest, we didn't want to stay there. We wanted to find things to replace those things that we lost. So no, it's not going to be exactly the same. A burger is a burger, right? Although we make a pretty good turkey cheddar burger. But
I love a turkey burger.
Yeah.
Love a turkey burger.
So that was the idea, right? Like we find other things that are safe that we can enjoy in a similar way. And that's really opened up a whole new world to us. We found a whole bunch of things that we maybe never would have tried that we end up loving.
I know you guys just told me that you are going to San Diego. So when you're planning a trip like that, of course, you need to look at the restaurants that you're going to be eating at. But I'm sure there are a number of other things that people wouldn't even think of. Like, do you need to call the hotel and make sure that you're not allergic to the sheets? Is there anything you need to do on the airplane? Like, what are some of the things that go into that?
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely call the hotel. I mean, we've learned by, failing forward, where we have had situations happen. Like, for example, I would have never thought about this, but when my family and I were in New York City last year, our hotel room was right beside the elevator, and the elevator shaft went all the way down to the kitchen. And so my husband actually was woken up to the smell of bacon and he was panicking. So that's something now that we ask, like if we do hotels, which we both prefer to do an Airbnb situation where we have access to a kitchen, it just makes things a lot easier where we can, reach out to the host ahead of time and ask those questions of, what laundry detergent are you using? What cleaning products do you use? Do you have plugins or scented candles or, machines that are scented? We have to make sure all of that stuff is out of there. When we were traveling across country, we were looking at flights that, are they serving food? What time does that typically happen? And all of our meds, we never leave home without our emergency kit. That means 2 EpiPens and all of our antihistamines.
And for someone who may have newly been diagnosed with alpha-gal, or maybe they're a friend or a family member of someone with alpha-gal, what are some resources like your packing list, or support systems that they should use to help them navigate?
Oh, there are actually quite a few out there now, which is so fantastic, right? Because when we started this, there weren't. And that
Yeah.
was part of the reason why we started this, because there was no or very limited guidance for us when we were first diagnosed. So that would include things like our 101 resource guide, where we just break down like the most important digestible nuggets of information on the basic things. And we can dive into that more with people who feel they need more individualized care. We do have our mentorship program. But Alpha-Gal Information is a fantastic site. alphagalinformation.org is a fantastic site, and you can find pretty much everything you want to know about Alpha-Gal there.
I mean, we host a podcast if you want to hear some other
I've
stories.
been on it.
Yes. Yes, we share stories, of resilience, just like Olivia shared, her amazing story of building TickMet with her dad. It was so fun. Aside from that, like there are great communities out there.
You might have never heard of, and then once you know about it, it's everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that kind of exploded after the CDC released numbers in 2023.
Yeah.
Everyone like just kind of perked up and started taking more note of that. And, we're grateful that they shared those statistics because we need them. And I think that was a driving force for us to launch the nonprofit to help, educate more providers, educate the public, because the average time to diagnosis is 7 years. That's a really long time. So we really want to help shorten that. And you never know if someone has been struggling with GI symptoms. There is just a GI variant where you may have been diagnosed with IBS and you're not finding relief. Well, you may need an alpha-gal test. It's a very simple blood test. So if we can help, people find an answer.
We're encouraged because there are a lot of researchers out there who are doing the work to help us discover information about alpha-gal. Dr. Scott Cummins down at UNC Chapel Hill, Dr. Platts Mills up at UVA, and their teams, they're working really hard to help figure out what's going on with alpha-gal syndrome. And so you can access their information from alphagalinformation.org or from our websites, or you can find them directly. There's a lot of, they've put out a lot of really great information.
Are there any new treatments or promising research developments in the alpha-gal space that give you hope?
Yes, they're there. I think we actually were on an interview this morning and got asked the same thing. And I know it's kind of probably the number one thing people want to know. Like, is there a treatment? What's happening? How can I avoid this? I mean, right now it's just avoiding getting bitten by ticks or getting bitten by more ticks.
Yeah.
But we were actually at a food allergy conference last year, and there were some researchers there from France and some other countries, and they actually spoke about some of these treatments that they're working on.
And there's some promising work being done in treatments for alpha-gal that have been done in the past for other allergies, right? Because it's an IgE response. So they're exploring how to use those and apply them to alpha-gal to maybe mitigate our reactions or lessen our symptoms. So
yeah. And I want to go back quickly because I think that this is the most important thing that you guys are doing. Is I very much believe in prevention. And so I assume that for people with alpha-gal, preventing these reactions is the most important thing to you guys. So I would love if you could talk about a little bit the work that your nonprofit is doing to, get the FDA to put some parameters into place.
Sure. So we do have a federal bill in place, not so much about tick prevention, but that is so important, Olivia. Like we could have an entire other conversation about that.
Yeah.
Probably should. But our federal bill would actually add alpha-gal to the list of major allergens. And so what that would mean is that, alpha-gal would be required to be labeled on packaged foods in the same way that other allergens are, like milk and soy, like where it's highlighted on the back, it would have to include alpha-gal as an allergen. And it has a lot of momentum right now in Congress. So we're very excited about it.
Yeah. So it would make us number 10.
I was just going to ask how many people are experiencing this allergy, but I guess you can see from Candice's shirt, it's like the 10th most common allergy in America right now. How many people get it every year? Do we know?
So I'm not sure about every year. What I do know is that study, the CDC study that came out summer of 2023, estimated as many as 450,000 people in the United States. From
And
what
what we
we
know about tick-borne diseases is these numbers are always far lower than it's
Yeah.
probably true. So
The number's off by an order of magnitude.
yeah,
So
it
we're,
always is. It
yeah,
always is. It's
yeah,
incredible. Yeah, there's so much that we don't know, and we can't just take these numbers and facts for, as they are. We have to assume that it's a much bigger problem because it
yeah,
very much probably is.
yeah.
Before we sign off, we like to ask every guest, what's one thing that ticks you off, big or small, rational or irrational? Let everyone know.
Oh, wow. Okay. How much time do we have to think about?
Oh, wow. What's one thing that
It could be alpha-gal related or not.
Okay, so I have one thing. It's not really okay, it kind of ticks me off, but I don't really get worked up about it, but it's an alpha gal thing. I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, maybe. But it's when we go into a restaurant and we say, like, I can't have mammal. And they say, okay, so no chicken. Like, no, chicken's okay. I can't have dairy. And they say, okay, so no eggs. We're like, nope, eggs are okay.
For the
So,
people in the restaurant who don't know the basic food groups, that makes sense.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And I'll say, like, kind of on that same line is when people downplay your reactions and say it's just anxiety.
Oh, that's a good one. That
Yep.
does tick me off.
And
That
that applies
takes
to
me bad.
every chronic illness in the books.
Yep.
It
Yep.
does.
Yep. Because anaphylaxis can induce anxiety.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in education on anaphylaxis alone because it doesn't always present with hives and swelling. And so when you are that person that goes in and you have someone not knowledgeable, it's awful. So
Mhm.
that ticks me off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing everything and for sharing your story. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and don't forget to follow TickMit for more insights, stories, and tips. Until next time, take care and check yourself.